It's part 3 of the Daily on Dong Raegu. In very exciting news, I'm going to tell you something that has nothing to do with Dong Raegu. I'm going to tell you about my knee. You see, after the Red Bull Battlegrounds tournament up in New York City, there was an after party. I went there, I did a little dancing, which, by the way, I tore it up. I started to walk back to the hotel. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I saw a 24-hour massage place. And I was like, let's do it. Now, most of you think that this is going to end up with something along the lines of Day 9 spends the evening with a prostitute. But in fact, it was just a normal massage spot. And she lied me down on my stomach, so I'm like sitting there with my face in one of those things that makes me wonder why beds aren't all made like that. And then she stands on my back. Now, I've had massages where someone stands on your back, and they're okay. I, in a lot of ways, feel like it's an excuse for giving a real massage. I don't really know where I'm supposed to push, so if I apply pressure everywhere, maybe relaxation will happen. But what she ends up doing is she just stomps on the back of my joints, and I'm like, ow, fuck, stop it. And she's like, oh, knee is very tight. And I'm like, of course it's tight, it's a bone. It's supposed to be tight. Well, I leave, and the next day, my right elbow and my left knee hurt so much, but I'm a 27-year-old white male, so I'm like, no, I need to go to the doctor. No, it's not that, nah. I live in a room by myself, so I don't actually need to see medical attention. And it actually kind of started to go okay. Things were sort of weaning down until 3 weeks ago, I decided to go on a hike. The pain has gone down, and I've diagnosed myself with a speedy recovery. It's time to begin the new year fresh with a hike out in the warm, sunny mountains of smoggy, filth-ridden LA. So I went up to Griffith. I'm hiking. I have an outfit that just looks dweeby as hell on me because my sneakers are way too clean because I haven't worn them a lot. I didn't really run in them much after getting them. And I'm feeling really proud of my strong knees until I decide to go down a particularly steep path. Now, when I say down a particularly steep path, I mean down. I'm on the top and I want to go down. So I'm like a really anxious spider, reverse climbing this thing, trying to climb. And I strain my weak sissy knee. And it hurts, and it's been hurting. And the hurting won't go away. It's a dull ache. And it's embarrassing being at the office, and someone's like, yeah, Sean, let's chat about the playtest. Let's talk about how things went. Let's get some coffee. I'm like, yeah, totally. Let's do it, Mark. And then I'm hobbling, and he's like, Jesus, what's wrong? You're limping. And I'm like, I got a massage, and it's kind of tender now. It's not going to sound good at all. So I finally was just like, okay, it's not getting better. I'm going to go to the doctor. So I went to an orthopedist this morning. Filled out a thing, went in there, sitting there anxiously. I don't like going to the doctor. I don't like it. Not for anything rational. I also don't like bugs. And I can kill any bug that fucks with me. But I'm still terrified of it. It's not poisonous bugs, anything that can fly. I'm just, same fear with doctors. I don't think they're bugs. I'm fine if they touch me, but I don't know, I just get that I just don't like it. I've had bad experiences, as you might imagine. And if you think I mean something sexual, you're false. Go ahead and watch the story of how I almost died. That's on YouTube. And the guy just comes in, and he's like, hey, what's going on? So tell me what happened. And I'm like, well, I got a massage, and it's quite tender. And he's like, a massage? Wow, you really do hear everything in the medical business. I'm like, yeah, I guess you do. I mean, that's not that extreme to have had a rough massage. At least I didn't try to jam a gerbil in my kneecap or something like that. You haven't seen everything, Mr. Overbold Knee Doctor. So I'm in there, And he's like, all right, no, let's take care of your elbow first. So what I want you to do is just hold your arm up. And he just like bends it. And he's like, is it tender there? I'm like, yeah, it's pretty tender. He's like, yeah, your elbow's fine. And I'm like, no, it's not. I'm here because it's not fine. He's like, nah, it's okay. I'm like, all right. And then he's like, here, go ahead and sit down on the table. So he like sits me down on the table. And he's like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, oh, shit. I'm a video game commentator for competitive video game tournaments. He's like, wow, video games? So like Centipede. Do you commentate Centipede? And I'm like, well, no. That's a single player game. And he's like, oh man, I don't even know. And he keeps looking at this nurse who's in the office with him, and she's like, can you shoot in Centipede? And I'm like, no, you can't shoot. And he's like taking my leg and like bending it around and stuff. And I'm like, no, I travel around. And he's like, sometimes after you do those video game things, do you get massages that hurt your knees? I'm like, that's actually exactly what happened. You have me pinned, Doc. So he like wiggles my knee around. He's like, does this hurt? And I'm like, no. He's like, does this hurt? No. He's like, can you do a favor and squat for me and put all the pressure on your left leg? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's gonna hurt. He's like, no, just go ahead and do it. I'm like, I know it'll hurt. And I get down and I'm just like, Argh! And he's like, okay, you've won yourself an MRI. And I'm like, I won the MRI. That's my favorite kind of competition where I have to pay so much money for first place. What a victory. Wow, it really does pay off to be the tortoise, doesn't it? Slow and steady. So then I sit there having won an MRI. And that's what he says. He's like, yeah, I felt your knee, there's swelling. So, something's up. It might be, have you heard of the meniscus? And I'm like, well, that's what bugs stand on the water, right? He's like, yeah, they do, but for your knee, have you heard of the knee meniscus? And I'm like, can I go? I want to go home. So he tells me that something might be wrong with the meniscus, but he doesn't know, and the important thing is that there's swelling, which means something's up. So he's like, I'll see you next week. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be in Palo Alto the next 2 weeks. Can I see you in 3 weeks? He's like, oh yeah, sure, 3 weeks, whatever you want. I'm like, whatever you want? Aren't you concerned about my meniscus? What if I told you I won't be back for 6 months? What are you going to be like, oh yeah, 6 months, whatever, it's fine, it's not a big deal. And wow, video games? I'm invested in a video game company. I don't even know what they do. They're in Mission Viejo though. And then he looks at me and I don't know whether to be like, that's a good place for a video game company to be. But I'm just looking at his deep, like, effortful lack of concern about my knee. And he's like talking to the nurse and they're laughing about what the shopping's like in Mission Viejo. While I'm sitting embarrassedly. I was worried about my knee. Nah, normally when something's hurt, if there's swelling, we do the MRI, but, don't worry, we'll just do it at your own pace. And I was like, well, I mean, maybe you haven't diagnosed the specific malady, but, I mean, generally, is there something I should do? And he says, and I quote, well, you ice it. I mean, normally if something's hurting, you just ice it. And then I left. What if there is a gerbil in my knee? And he's tunneling. He's like expanding his knee condo. And I don't know. Maybe they're going to find him under the warm meniscus of my knee. But he's just like, oh yeah, just ice it. The gerbil will just eventually move out. It's cold. There's not good insulation on the meniscus. Like, what do you mean? Just ice it. And I'm like, how many times a day? He's like, twice. Palms in the air. Like, I don't know, 2 sounds good. So now I am going to have my knee MRI'd, and likely at great expense. find out that all I needed to do was ice it. And then as I'm going, he's like, and don't do any more hikes. And the nurse is like, oh, doctor. So there we go. Let's head back to the game. Disappointingly. I don't even know why I don't just tell stories every single day. They only charged me like $58,000. And then a Reddit thread appeared that was like, you can fly to Monaco and get MRI'd there and fly back and buy new knees and a family for less than that MRI cost to learn the icing information. I'm like, okay, you're being self-righteous, but I had a stressful day and a very tender knee. And you know, I trust him because he wasn't alarmed, but I felt bad. I didn't feel good. Let's go to the DRG cam. Let's wrap this puppy up. First, we see a hatchery first, a patrolling drone, because cannon rushes are the worst. Our friend DRG, he just wants to see if the Protoss will try to do any fast XP, which is short for expansion. This is, I think, a cool move. The drone that was spotting to see if there was some sort of probe play finally gets pulled to go for the hatch, the third hatch. And we might ask ourselves, well, wait a minute. DRG has been unable to identify if he's going Nexus first or Gateway first at the time of that hatch going down. For instance, if we look right here, Dongregu hasn't seen anything, and he's already sending the drone. This is because it's a map-specific, a map-dependent thing. On this map, there is enough distance and enough easy coverage. Actually, I should just say enough easy coverage with this watchtower and then the space in here that, you know, a 3 hatch is still pretty comfortable against aggressive gateway pressure. And even then, Dongregu gets the extractor and then the pool and then the overlord. I mean, this is like... Oh no, he doesn't even get the overlord then. He actually just keeps making drones. And keeps making drones, and then on 20 of 20, I guess, he gets the overlord. I'd theorize. Does Dongregu build overlords? Did he go AFK? Is my replay bugged? Did it desync? Oh, there's 2 overlords. There, oh there, is a pair and a pair. I feel like he misclicked. Either way. Metabolic booster. Going down. So at this point in time, Dongregu doesn't know much, but he's theorizing that something is awry. He's building many a queen. He has no queens out yet, but is getting 3 queens. And we can see what this metabolic boost, we can see what its purpose is for. There we go. This metabolic boost is to get Zergling speed out to deal with some aggressive gateway pressure. And what if there is no early gateway pressure? Dongregu has scouted what he thinks he can. He sees some defensive units. Notice how big of a signal this is for Dongregu. Defensive units. He doesn't see, like, nothing. Or zealots moving in. He gets a sense that these units are non-aggressive units, at least at the 6-minute mark. And they're in the base. So Dongregu does a whole bunch of things that I just livy love. What I have seen happen quite often is that players will be thinking, well crap, I either have to get spores and queens up for air, or I need to get the layer up to be able to flood all sorts of speed upgrades and roaches to deal with all that sort of crud. But here, Dongregu gets himself a fairly swift roach warren and just begins stockpiling up on the queeners. The Zergling speed just has so much freaking usage here. I do like a Zergling chilling there, though. That seems pretty good. 4 queens out on the map right now. Creep tumors, a spreading, the creep kind of joining everything together. These queens aren't super active with the vomitage of all that fancy time larva injects. Instead, they're doing a lot of creep spread because that's super important in here. And even upon seeing this attack, we see more drones getting produced. And DRG just does a pretty straightforward defense from here. The queen at the front still spreads creep. A single spine crawler goes down. No hurry at all to try to flood and get some kind of super fast layer there. 2 spines. Spines in tight places are the counter to sentries in tight places. And just great tactics. The Zerglings hanging at the back to just ensure that there's no pylons. Roaches at the front. Continued adagio of spines. And here's one of my favorite positional moves. Right before the attack begins, the queen from over here moves up here. And another queen gets produced. Oh! Queens are one of DRG's strongest defenses in this position because they're just so beefy. In attacks with lots of units, they're much weaker because they just don't really have a high damage output. But here they just absorb so much damage. I'm actually going to have the queen selected with 4 queens being in this fight, taking all sorts of damage, making that mothership core go away. Oh, how lovely. They can shoot down the warp prism, which would be one of the only tools that this could warp in with. Notice that because we had speed Zerglings following it, he can't really have a proxy pylon. So the queens deal with the only other potential threat. And Sora's push eventually peters out. But look at this, all the queens in the push. Every single one! No larva being injected here or there. Because larva's not really what we're desperate for right now, it's just staying alive! Just staying alive! And look at that, 42 drones. So good. So good. As many as he should. And what do you know? Another queen. This is kind of a cool move that DRG does in this game. He pulls queens from hatches and then rebuilds them. He doesn't pull queens from hatches for as long as he can and then send him back. Or send them back. He sort of just accepts that these queens are going to be having a life of offense. Which he rather hastily sends them out to perform. Now, if there was a third base going down, those queens could actually trundle cross map and do a pretty good bit of the damage. But that Warp Prism Harass is very nicely set up, and we see still not a lot of droning happening out of DRG. Now, I think this is a super smart, super subtle move. If our opponent opened up with some sort of immortal-based attack with gateway units. And also, never forget, you can count how many gateways he has by seeing how many units simultaneously are warping in on the warp prism. And I like to call it 3, a shitload, or somewhere in between. Those are good enough. Those are good enough numbers to use. If it's just 3, he's probably saving up for an expand. If it's a shitload, he's probably all in. And if it's somewhere in between, then he's probably going to be able to do a follow-up attack. So we see that DRG has actually never stopped building roaches. He hasn't even begun getting speed because his layer isn't done yet. So he's actually going for a mass queen with roach defense. Look at that, 6 queens. Really slick play. Super slick, super cool. DRG, he is no fool. Only roach, oh my gosh, what? Lots of creep spread will hurt Sora's butt. I don't know why I said that, but that's what happened. The one thing that DRG's not doing that it's sort of implied that he is he's just making sure that there's no expand here. These rocks are still up, but the expand could be going down. Sora with the scary 2 bears. So look at that. Spines, queens, lots of queens. 5 queens with lots of energy. Transfuse, absorbing all the hit transfuse. And a transfuse, you don't lose when you transfuse. Lots of queens. More queens, the queen, the neglected hero of the Protoss race. And by the Protoss race, I totally meant this. Look at the queens shooting at the warp prism. There's no retreat for now, kind of. Oh, be careful, Sora. Dancing from DRG. Dancing's what he do. Alright, cool. So here is a position where we are not positive. Oh, that's actually just a really good attack. This is what I mean by Sora being like, you know, like really good. So in this position, we see a spare. But in what way is he going to spare? Really depends on what goes on with this expansion. If he doesn't expand, we can reinforce our roaches with corruptors. If he does expand, we can perhaps transition into laying muta. Or we can continue to apply pressure with roach corruptor. Everything else getting rounded out, extra hatches here and there, spreading hatches everywhere. Oh my god, this hatch here is so great. Look at this hatchery. How Protoss will be irate. It's pretty frequent here to again see someone be like, oh, the tried and true path is to build a macro hatch now. Most of the reason why a macro hatch is happening in base is because it's not safe. If you can put that hatch at a base, you should put that hatch at a base. And here is a mind game. Mind games! Two mutalisks, shooting down the warp prism with no risks. Just two, there's nothing else he'll do. He's upgrading the roaches. He is getting hydras. Remember, what was this for? To get corruptors in case of Colossus. Do you see a Colossus? I don't see a Colossus. So there's no corruptors. Do you see a Colossus? I don't see a Colossus. Hydras reinforced with roaches. Super, super well. It will send the Protoss player to his place in hell. And there's those Zerg players watching like, yeah, send him to hell! To burn in eternal hellfire for billions of years because I lost 28 ladder points yesterday. Oh, send him to hell! To hell! In the meantime, just doing little pokes and prods and things that we tend to see the roaches do. Moving left, moving right, killing anything in sight, killing warp gates, killing Protoss, killing whatever that we can. So the Hydras are getting massed on the backside, but where else is? I don't seem to see any up in here. Blink has to happen. Why? Because Protoss doesn't have a Stargate. So Protoss has no answer to mass mutaliskage. And he's seen mutalisks, so he has to do that. But then Roach Hydra, we appreciate Dongregu's Roach Hydra, but then he got Roach Hydra. There was not much that we could do, so we just surrendered or defended it with Colossus 2. Oh my gosh, our Roach Hydra, it has fallen down, but this is no problem because he's almost mined himself into the ground. Oh, that's one thing never forget. If you've held off a lot of early attacks, a third base might actually be the only base that player has. So Roach Hydra continues to be really effective. If he gets a fast third base, you gotta do some more considerable tech stuffs. But here Dongregu has safety at his side, for our Protoss player has almost mined out his insides. Counter-attacking War Prism, there's not much it can do because the Mutalisks are out on the map in a number of 2. Oh no wait, the Mutalisks are dead. Oh look, a little Colossus. I think we must retreat. But once we get Corruptors, then his face will be in beat. Like that. His face is gonna get beat in. Roach Hydra is effective forever. Some guy who's not watched StarCraft 2 since the beta was like, dude, the strategies haven't changed, it's just Roach Hydra. And everyone's like, metagame. Metagame, newbie. The maps are bigger. And then he wins. He's already won. But Sora's gonna stay in and have just some fun. And that's the show. Let's take some questions. Can you disable sub chat? For some reason, I can't type to my subs. I try to type to my subs. That's something I tried to do. But Twitch just simply would not let me do. it. It's also important to note it just might not be Twitch. It could in fact be Firefox being a complete and utter bitch. But honestly, I like Firefox, and I do like Chrome too. For me, it's not a political thing to choose which browser I like to use. Firefox is a cooler name than Chrome. That's the basis that I made. Mecha Dangerous asks if I use brown switches. Yeah, damn right. Jesus! Do you realize if you kick a water glass that it can spill? So the anti-citizen says, what about against the toss with mass stalkers and like 5 or 6 Colossus? In what way, Mr. Citizen? Little Big 11 says, Day 9, I was noticing that a lot of the strategy in Game 1 relied on a knowledge of timings. While this might be effective for people in Masters or Grandmasters, how can we take this knowledge to the lower leagues where timings aren't as well defined and most players either don't recognize or don't scout these kill sequences? Okay, look. Here is such an important thing about timings. It's very hard not to think this way because of the way that people talk in forums. But every timing, actually commentators do it too, every timing is a timing not because that's when that does happen. It's the earliest it can happen. So for instance, in Game 1, if a player goes Gateway, then Nexus, I don't care if he is a Grandmaster player, a Code S contender like Sora, or an embarrassingly bad Bronze newbie. If he goes Gateway Nexus, then the earliest that he can have Warp Gate done is around 7 minutes. The earliest. This is the earliest it can happen, so we can exploit this at the lower leagues. Very often, what will happen is that someone will say, you know, they'll, trying to think of an example where that would really hurt. Maybe this is a weak example, but it's the only one I can think of. I watched a game recently where someone sent me a game saying, I've been trying to do the aggressive warp gate pressure that I see in pro games, but it just gets crushed. Because the pro games talk about it's a good timing because it's before Zerg has a lot of units. And I watched the game, and he went Gateway, Nexus, Gateway, Gateway to do that pressure with the Zealots. And then he walked into a Zerg player that had like 48 Zerglings, and he lost all his Zealots and was like, "What? I thought there was a timing here." Now, the issue there is that there's some secret information not mentioned in that timing. Secretly, if he is building lots of drones, is the statement there, then the earliest he will normally get a lot of units is long after the 7-minute mark, which is why a 7-minute strike works so well. But you have to scout him building the drones. That sort of thing. So that's how I would describe it. And honestly, if none of that made any sense to you, here's all I want you to do. Pick a build, do it as great as you can, and as you get higher and higher and higher and higher up, you'll start to feel the timings of your build. Wow, if I attack at 15 minutes, I die. But when I've been attacking at 14 minutes, I win a lot. What happened between 14 and 15 minutes? That works great. And if you're trying to think more in terms of timing, forget all other timings except ones that have the following format. The earliest he can have X is at time Y. And work with that. The earliest that a Zerg can get Mutalisks out after he's gone for 3 bases is like 11 minutes. Last question. Andrew YK1243. Day 9, do you have any suggestions on how to become funnier naturally? I don't know if this is a natural way to do it, but here's what I did. Go watch a lot of stand-up comedy and memorize jokes. Watch that stand-up routine 3 or 4 times and memorize not the joke, but the exact intonation of it. Be able to sound precisely like that stand-up comic. And once you've memorized a lot, you will have a repertoire of jokes. Use them shamelessly in social settings. Just use them. Just use the same joke. And if anyone's like, hey, that was from that stand-up comic, just be like, yeah, totally, I just saw his routine, it was amazing. Don't be like, shit, you caught me, fuck, damn it, you've discovered, there's nothing, you can totally credit them. I have used jokes from stand-up routines on this show and then promptly been like, that was from a stand-up routine from this guy. Okay, so once you've done that, you have a whole repertoire of jokes, you'll start to just feel ways to reappropriate them. You'll have like 15 punchlines at any point in time in your head. You'll just use the punchline. Just build your knowledge out, and there you go. Go read a lot of jokes online. I mean, for me, I just tried to memorize a whole lot of stuff, and after a while, occasionally someone would say something, and then my mouth would just repeat a thing I'd heard, and I'd be like, oh, people are laughing. What just happened? I may have been funny today. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you for me getting absolutely mollywomped in Hearthstone tomorrow. Muting my microphone.